Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping straight into the fascinating and honestly pretty counterintuitive science of how our brains actually retain information. We're drawing directly from the brilliant insights found in the book Make It Stick. So if you've ever felt like you're putting in the hours, but your study habits just aren't clicking, you are in exactly the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this text by cognitive scientists Henry Roediger, Mark McDaniel, and storyteller Peter Brown. Their decades of research reveal a really hard truth. A lot of what we accept as absolute gospel about how to study, it's actually just wasted effort. It turns out the most effective ways to learn are completely counterintuitive.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. The high stakes of real learning. 2. Why popular habits fail. 3. The illusions of knowing. 4. Science-backed study strategies. And finally, 5. Mastering your mental models.
Section 1. The high stakes of real learning, when memory means survival.
So let's start with a gripping real-life scenario from Chapter 1. It perfectly illustrates why having knowledge instantly available from memory is so incredibly crucial. Picture this. Pilot Matt Brown is flying a twin-engine Cessna alone at night, 11,000 feet up in the air, making a routine freight run. Suddenly, he notices a drop in oil pressure in his right engine. He's losing it. Now, he can't exactly just pull out a manual and flip to the index. He has to run a mental checklist. He has to rely entirely on his memorized tolerances for that Cessna 401. He knows he has to shut down the ailing right engine, feather the prop to reduce drag, crank up the power on the left, and fly with opposite rudder. He even knows, right in that terrifying moment, that his final approach has to be a wide left-hand turn, because without power on his right side, that's literally the only way he maintains enough lift to level out for a touchdown.
That story brilliantly illustrates the core premise of the book's first chapter. Learning isn't just about cramming facts into your head to pass a test. True learning is about acquiring knowledge and storing it so durably, so deeply, that it's there exactly when you need it to solve future problems, even when you are thousands of feet in the air trying not to crash.
Section 2. Why popular habits fail, or as I like to call it, the illusion of mastery.
This brings us to a harsh reality. Our default, go-to learning habits are failing us miserably. There is a massive disconnect between what we want to do and what actually works. The text points out that rereading and massed practice, that single-minded rapid-fire repetition we typically call cramming, and yes, going absolutely crazy with a neon yellow highlighter, are basically everyone's preferred study strategies, but they are among the absolute least productive. Why? Because highlighting and rereading give us a false sense of fluency. You look at your brightly colored notes and think, oh yeah, I know this, but that is just an illusion of mastery. True mastery comes from things like retrieval practice, spacing, and interleaving, which force your brain to actually interrupt the process of forgetting.
To put it bluntly, the authors state, learning that's easy is like writing in sand, here today and gone tomorrow. If your study session feels rapid-fire, single-minded, and easy, you aren't building a durable memory. True learning requires effort, plain and simple. You absolutely have to embrace the difficulties of effortful learning.
Section 3. The illusions of knowing. System 1 versus System 2.
So, you might be wondering, why are our brains so easily tricked into thinking we've learned something when we actually haven't? Well, drawing on the groundbreaking work of psychologist Daniel Kahneman, the authors explain that our thinking is governed by two systems. System 1 is automatic, unconscious, and immediate. It's your gut instinct. It detects danger and keeps us safe based on reflexes. System 2, on the other hand, is the slower process of conscious analysis, choice, and reasoning. Real learning and metacognition, which is essentially monitoring our own thinking, rely on System 2 checking our impulses. But often, our reflexive System 1 creates powerful illusions that just completely override our analytical System 2.
And the book gives a terrifying example of this with China Airlines Flight 006. Cruising at 41,000 feet, one of the plane's engines lost power. The plane began to slow and roll to the right, but the captain experienced what's known as spatial disorientation. Because of the plane's trajectory, his System 1 sensory instinct gave him the profound physical sensation that he was flying perfectly level. This System 1 illusion was so convincing, so visceral, that he actually ignored his System 2 cockpit instruments, assuming they must be broken. He pushed the nose down, sending a massive Boeing 747 into an uncontrolled dive, nearly destroying the aircraft before breaking through the clouds and pulling up at just 11,000 feet. The crucial takeaway here? We cannot always trust our immediate feelings of fluency or perception. We have to actively test ourselves against reality.
Which brings us to Section 4, Science-Backed Study Strategies, your tools for durable memory.
Okay, so if we can't trust our feelings of fluency, how do we properly engage System 2 and actually learn? The text outlines 4 incredibly powerful, science-backed learning tools that you can start using today to aggressively combat those illusions of knowing. Retrieval practice, spaced practice, interleaved practice, and elaboration.
Let's break these down into actionable steps. First up, retrieval. Just using simple flashcards and self-quizzing interrupts forgetting. It literally strengthens your neural pathways. Second is spacing. This means allowing yourself to get a little rusty between study sessions. Recalling information after a delay is harder, right? But that specific effort is exactly what produces a longer-lasting memory. Third, interleaving. Instead of doing 50 volume calculations for a cone in a row, mix up different geometric shapes. Mixing problem types improves your ability to differentiate solutions when you encounter new, random scenarios later on in the wild. And fourth, elaboration. This is connecting new ideas to what you already know, but in your own words. The big takeaway here is that while taking a quiz or mixing up your subjects feels significantly harder and way less productive than just rereading your notes, that specific struggle is the exact thing building structural bridges in your brain.
Section 5, Mastering Your Mental Models and Building a Foundation.
So how do all of these strategies build into the ultimate goal of learning? The book defines a mental model as a mental representation of some external reality. Think of a professional baseball batter waiting for a pitch. He has literally less than an instant to decipher what's hurtling toward him. But through interleaved and varied practice over time, he's learned to winnow out all the extraneous visual distractions. He focuses only on subtle cues. The pitchers wind up the spin of the seams, and he forms distinct mental models in a fraction of a second to identify a curveball versus a changeup. That is what complex mastery looks like.
So how do you do this? It's a 3-step formula. Step 1, extract key ideas. Step 2, organize them. Step 3, connect that model to prior knowledge. You can do this by tying new knowledge to vivid or even totally bizarre existing memories. The book shares a great example of a student named Marlies studying for a psychology exam. She needed to remember the concepts of restraint theory and disinhibition, which is the idea that trying not to overeat can actually cause a complete loss of control. So, Marlies used elaboration. She literally visualized a giant man-eating plant from a movie holding her friend captive in a coffee shop, physically restraining him from a massive dish of mac and cheese just beyond his reach. By tying a complex academic text to a vivid, structured, and kind of hilarious story in her mind, she built a mental model that made the concept impossible to forget.
And this brings us to a profound realization summarized by a quote from Aeschylus right on the opening pages of the book: "Memory is the mother of all wisdom." So many people believe intellectual ability is just hardwired from birth. You either have it or you don't. But the science shows that every single time you push through the difficulty of true learning, every time you test yourself, space your practice, and elaborate, you physically change your brain. You are storing the residue of your experiences. Failure and struggle aren't signs that you aren't smart. They are badges of effort. They mean you are doing the real important work of building wisdom.
So the next time you sit down to study or learn a totally new skill, I have a challenge for you. Are you going to take the easy, comfortable road of reading and rereading, or are you ready to finally ditch the neon highlighters and embrace the struggle? Put the book away, test yourself, and lean into the effort, because according to the science, that is exactly how you make it stick. See you next time.